You mentioned that you're planning for after Vermont Yankee closes. Do you look at it like Vermont Yankee is closing in a year?
Right now, the status of Vermont Yankee is that there's a statute that says it can't continue operating unless the legislature gives approval. The legislature voted on that negatively in a very strong way. So I have to assume at this time that it's not going to continue operating, and we need to be prepared for that. Certainly, we also need to prepare. It's possible that that situation could turn around, I suppose, or change is what I mean to say. But until it does, we have to assume it's not operating. That's the assumption I'm making.
And how unprepared is the state for that?
It's not. I don't think I think we're quite prepared. There's a market in New England where we can buy power. The utilities are taking steps to work with the independent system operator of New England to make sure that there won't be a reliability problem if that plant's not operating. There are meetings going on even in the next few weeks and months ahead, and there have been in the past. And the briefings I've had are that this should not be a significant issue. It certainly does present some challenges because that plant provides a lot of reinforcement to the grid right at that point, but but they're putting in place operating procedures that should be able to deal with that.
Can I ask the all-important question of how old you are?
Sure. I'm 61.
And as long as we're on that kind of stuff, what does this job pay? We can look it up.
You can look it up. Off the top, the official salary or what I'm actually getting after the 5%?
Whichever you'd like to tell us.
I think the statutory salary is $122,800, and I'm getting 5% less than that, and I don't recall exactly what that is. That was a voluntary. The board members all took the voluntary 5% pay cut at the request of the governor when the state made the cuts to all the other employees.
What do the side members get, the part-time members?
I don't. They get 2/3 of what I do.
Okay. Because it's more than 2/3 of a job, isn't it? In terms of the hours
they spend a lot of time, yes. It's almost a full-time job in many ways.
In terms of April 1?
My term was up March 1st, but the statute, the law allows me to continue serving until my replacement shows up or until I get reappointed. Thanks, Jim. Okay, thank you.
One last question. There's been some talk over time of reconfiguring. Vermont has a kind of an unusual setup with the Department of Public Service and the Public Service Board separated and all that sort of thing. There's been some talk over time. Occasionally you'll hear a legislator come out and say, "I want to redo this system" or whatever. Do you think we have a good system right now?
Yeah, actually, I think it works very well. What people forget is before 1981, the structure we had was the board was part of the Department of Public Service. The chair of the board worked for the governor and was the commissioner of the Department of Public Service. And there were 2 half-time board members. And during that period in the 70s, it was decided that it wasn't such a good idea to be structured that way and have the board actually be part of the administration. And so they were separated in 1981. And I think the system works really well because the department represents the governor and does a lot of important things. It does the planning for does electric planning, telecom planning. It's the state's energy office for federal matters, and it does the advocacy. And because it represents the governor, I think it is a very effective advocate. In some states, the public advocate is a separate appointed entity that's poorly funded and doesn't really have the kind of weight that the department has. And I think, and the resources that the department has, and I think that provides a very, very helpful balance to the cases that the utilities put on. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, very much appreciate the reappointment. Thanks.
You didn't ask him a really tough question. When I called him, he was down in Florida on vacation. I thought you might ask him about his vacation.
Governor, I had a utility question, and maybe the chairman. It pertains to a case there, and it's the Vermont Gas case and the use.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Is it appropriate to use ratepayer funds that would come under some circumstances would come back to ratepayers? And because of overcharges, to have that money go to Vermont Gas to use for a system build out instead of the money coming back to ratepayers' pockets? Is that an appropriate thing?
Well, if it was the first rate decrease, we could debate that. The fact is that natural gas prices are artificially low, and we're now at the 9th rate decrease, I believe, in the last year and a half. All we're asking, the department and myself, is for us to pool further rate increases. You invest those dollars to expand natural gas in Vermont, which is going to serve all Vermonters well, create jobs and economic opportunities. And if we fail in doing that, we then give the money back to the ratepayers. So we're trying to create a pool of resources. I think it is fair. I think it's fair that people on the system help invest in expanding the system. People with natural gas, I'm saying this as a Southern Vermont boy, have an extraordinary economic advantage in this economy. Right now, with oil prices hitting $4 a gallon, the natural gas advantage, economic advantage for Vermonters who are struggling to heat their homes, the spread between oil and natural gas continues to expand in the direction of natural gas customers. And I was down in Middlebury last week cutting a ribbon for an expansion of a business down there. Everyone down in Addison County is hopeful that we can get natural gas down to Middlebury. And if we can get it down to Florence, I've spoken with OMIA, it's a huge help to OMIA. So I think it's a prudent investment.
But the company that owns Vermont Gas presumably has quite a bit of capital to invest in its system.
Well, they will be. Let's be clear. I think our pooling of resources might get us upwards of $2.73 million a year. That's my recollection of the numbers. It's a $60 million expansion. So we're just trying to prime the pump. But Gas Metro is going to have plenty of skin in the game.
Sort of a question on a different issue. The House is debating and or voting on Pete's Moose right now. So in earlier press conferences, you had said very clearly that you wanted a pardon and you wanted all the animals saved. Is that still your position?
Well, I backed down on all the animals. I shouldn't say I backed down. I think I sent you a mixed message. What I said was, we'll let the biologists figure out what's best for the other animals. I want to ensure that Pete the Moose continues to live, and I issued him a pardon. So, and I did give sort of a murky response to that one. I apologize, but I had my press people correct it within minutes of my murky answer.
So some animals are more equal than others?
Well, if you're named Pete and you have a big nose, you're going to get some sympathy over somebody else.
Governor, on another subject that would have made Mr. Volz leave the room if he was still here. Yesterday, the Federal Nuclear Regulatory Commission formally announced that they were rather formally issuing a 20-year license extension to Vermont Yankee. What is your response to this action?
Well, I guess as I watch events in Japan and the tragedy that they're facing there, I was listening to an article, a news piece last night on one of the radio stations I was listening to, and you listen to the restaurant operators in Tokyo who can't get food into the restaurants because they have been buying their food from the north, their fish from the north. It's the best fishing grounds in Japan, and they have elevated levels of radiation, which makes it unsafe to eat in both vegetables and fish already. It reminds us of why Vermont is so fortunate to have the good judgment to determine our own destiny when it comes to aging nuclear power plants. And I just thank God every day that Vermont is Vermont, that we have courage, that we have foresight, that we are not living under the policy of what I call irrational exuberance about the ability to run our aging nuclear power plants beyond their design life. And so I guess my response is I'm not surprised that the NRC continues to relicense aging nuclear power plants. That seems to be the policy down there. And I'm grateful that Vermont can go its own way, and I'm doubly grateful that the NRC has acknowledged that Vermont has the power to determine its own destiny.
You getting any sense of how this plays out in the next year?
Well, we're doing everything that we know how, as the chair just pointed out, to make sure that when the plant shut down in 2012, that we have the best, most predictable price for Vermonters, and that obviously there are no transmission issues, and that Vermont Yankee keeps their promise, enters Louisiana, and decommissions it as quickly as we can.
You've not heard any indication from them about court action?
Not directly. Well, I hear the same rumors you do. But no, the answer is they haven't filed that I know of.
One of the big issues at these plants in Japan is the spent fuel storage, which is adjacent to the hardened reactor containment, but open to the elements if the top is blown off. And Yankee has the same system, but it actually has more fuel stored there. Can the state do anything to ask Yankee to move that fuel more quickly from that fuel pool to dry cask containment, get it out of that proximity to the reactor?
But the only good news for America from the tragedy in Japan is that even the federal government has suggested that they're going to take a second look at both the ability of our plants to withstand natural disasters, which is, in my judgment, always been highly overrated. We're dealing with 20th century engineering in the 21st century. And they're going to look at the storage issue and where we're storing our fuel. As you probably know, the structure in Vernon, Vermont is exactly the same as it is in Japan. Rods stored at high levels that aren't in dry cask storages. So, we have the same challenge as Japan does. I think, again, our big challenge is that we were all promised in the state of Vermont that when the plant was built, that three things would happen. It would be shut down on schedule in 2012. There would be no nuclear waste left at the site, and that the plant would be decommissioned and taken away and returned to a greenfield. It turns out that the wishes of Energy Louisiana and the facts about the other two were all not true. So we have our challenges.
So would you push or encourage the plant to move more of that to the dry cask? Is that something, I know there's going to be a national review, but is that something that you're hoping that the plant would do?
Well, I'm not pretending to be an expert on storage of nuclear waste, but you don't have to be to know that storing it on the banks of the Connecticut River for hundreds of years was never part of the plan because it didn't make sense. And the best place to store high-level nuclear waste isn't in a place that has the climate changes that Vermont has, that has floods near a river, and frankly, that's not suited for high-level waste storage, which is why Vermont was never designated as a possible site. So I'm going to continue to urge the President, Congress, and Energy Louisiana to use those dry casks for their intended purpose, hook them up and haul them out somewhere, but get them out of Vermont.
Governor, what if Energy decides to keep the plant running after March 2012? What could the state do at that point if they just refuse to shut it down?
Well, they'd be breaking the law. And as governor, it's my job to make sure that everyone complies with the laws that we have in Vermont. I can't believe that Energy Louisiana, which also has to run plants in other states, really wants to be known as the lawbreaker. I don't think it enhances their publicly traded company. I don't think it enhances their already tarnished reputation as a company that seems to have difficulty telling the truth. And I don't think it would serve them very well. It certainly wouldn't serve us very well. So I think they'll comply with the law.
The tax bill that's coming up today, you can support that. We made some changes to your proposals. There's also going to be a push to do an income tax. What do you think of that?
Well, let me first say that I think the Ways and Means Committee in the House, under the leadership of Chairman Ansell, and the Appropriations Committee in the House, under the leadership of Representative Heath, have done yeoman's work balancing the budget and coming up with creative ideas, not all ours, obviously, that are going to help us pass a sustainable budget that matches our appetite for spending with the ability of Vermonters to pay. There are a couple of areas where I have some concerns, and we hope to work those out as the bill runs through the legislature.